Thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar. My name is Jeff Kerr and I'm the Trade Advisor for TradeStart Austrade and the Principal Trade and Investment Officer for Trade and Investment Queensland, based in Gladstone, Central Queensland. Today we are presenting Introduction to Exporting, presented by Trade and Investment Queensland in partnership with Export Council of Australia. TIQ is Queensland Government's dedicated global business agency, helping Queensland exporters take their product to international markets and promoting Queensland as the perfect place for investment. TIQ has 12 international trade commissioners in markets across 16 offices. Specialised sector teams in Brisbane. Queensland is Australia's second largest exporter by value, with the state's total merchandise exports accounting for about 1/5 of the national total. TIQ's priority industries and sectors are food and agribusiness, mining, resources and energy, knowledge industries, business and skills migration, aged care and senior living, urban development and infrastructure, education and training. TIQ has 8 regional-based offices across Queensland, with 15 regional staff, including 2 supporting Toowoomba. Our team of client managers across Queensland also includes a network of TradeStart advisors that provide enhanced assistance and services to clients on their export journey. As part of TIQ's partnership with Austrade, clients are able to gain additional support with access to Austrade's global offices and information and services. The TradeStart network is an extension of Austrade's own offices and is delivered in partnership with state, territory and local governments, industry associations and Chamber of Commerce. The prime objective of Austrade's TradeStart network is to assist small and medium-sized exporters to achieve long-term success in the international markets. It offers exporters the combined resources of Austrade and TIQ, providing local assistance and a direct link to Austrade services and overseas network. TIQ's team of representatives help Queensland businesses through their export journey to take advantage of export opportunities in markets around the world. What does the export journey look like for business clients? Clients receive a suite of services tailored to meet their specific needs. TIQ assesses the client's export readiness to provide the best service to meet your needs. If a client is not export ready, TIQ will provide information and reference links. They'll introduce the client to relevant organisations that can assist and link them to training and workshop opportunities to build their capacity to be export ready. They will check in with the business to see how they are going if they need further assistance. Clients that are export ready have a dedicated client manager who is their representative through their export journey with TIQ. The client manager will qualify the client's readiness to export, establish a client's team with different units across TIQ and other agencies if needed, work with the client to determine a suitable market entry or expansion strategy, make introductions to international buyers and include the client on missions. They facilitate connections across government and invite the client to relevant export functions, forums and events. They also provide aftercare to check in with the client on the export journey to see if they can provide further assistance. An example of the type of support TIQ provides to clients during COVID is with current overseas travel restrictions. Queensland exporters are facing the challenge of being unable to visit export markets, hindering access to trade opportunities and limiting their ability to engage with potential new customers and supply chain partners. A good example of what a client manager can do for a business during this time is what we like to call a virtual tasting. It's an assessment of clients' export readiness and a tailored service needed. Samples of a product are sent into market and a Skype Zoom meeting is set up between TIQ's regional office, where the business is located, the client, and the Trade Commissioner's office and the buyers. Introductions are made via the virtual meeting. If the product is a processed food product or, for example, wine, a virtual tasting of the product occurs and discussions on the product directly. After the meeting, there are follow-up activities around the market opportunities. TRQ also has initiatives that support Queensland businesses to achieve export outcomes. One of these is the Go Global Export Program that provides Queensland export-ready small to medium-sized businesses with financial support to enter a new international market. There are two levels of project funding available: micro export grant of up to $5,000 and a macro export grant up to $25,000. More information about the program can be found on the link, and we are working at the moment on a new rollout of the program, which we're hoping will be early in the new year, possibly February or March. Another TRQ initiative is the Export Market Engagement Program, which gives Queensland exporters an opportunity to travel, when possible, to their targeted export markets to do market research and make new business connections. The program provides access to market knowledge, international networks, and government resources to tailor the product or service and potential increase their export sales. Again, we've got a link there on the page, TRQ website. The Export Market Development Grant Scheme is a key Australian government financial assistance program for aspiring and current exporters. Administered by Austrade, the scheme supports a wide range of industries. It encourages businesses to increase international marketing and promotion expenditure to achieve more sustainable international sales. It also provides businesses with an opportunity to enter and embed themselves in global value chains, something that encompasses 80% of global trade. Again, a link to the Austrade website there with more information about the grant. TRQ also provides further support to small to medium enterprises with capability building. TRQ provides face-to-face workshops across a number of topics to support businesses to achieve export success. During COVID, TRQ has facilitated pre-recorded capacity building webinars to support businesses to diversify into new markets with key focus on international market-specific COVID-19 intelligence. Tailored export development presentations can be found on our website. The Queensland Government has a dedicated site with grants assistance and initiatives to support businesses across Queensland. There are many grants and funding programs to support businesses listed on this easy to navigate site. To further support COVID-19 affected businesses, the Queensland Government also has a COVID-19 Business Assistance Finder on this site. The key sites are business.qld.gov.au and the COVID assistance /COVID-assistance. That's all I have for you today. If you would like to note down my contact details there, if you'd like to give me a call to discuss any of those opportunities on there. I'll stop sharing my presentation there now and hand over to Shane Stiles. So Shane has over 20 years of experience facilitating businesses internationally across a range of industries, cultures and markets. Shane is the National Skills Development Manager with Export Council of Australia. Over to you, Shane.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and good morning, everybody. We live in this wonderful new COVID world at the moment where we can't do this face-to-face, but I do look forward to very soon being able to do that. The Export Council has been around for the past 60 years, and the focus of the Export Council is effectively helping organisations across Australia trade in a global economy. We also work closely with government around trade policy, trade barriers, and we do a lot of work with industry bodies in supporting them and their exporters. As Jeffrey said, I've been involved in international exporting for over 20 years, traveled extensively around the world and been involved in various industries from construction to project management, food and beverage, hospitality, tourism, and a few other bits and pieces in there. And those senior at the Export Council. I've been involved with the Export Council 6 years. I also have my own consulting company supporting Australian companies exporting, and we have our own exporting company as well, which is part of the mandated ECA that senior people are actively involved in exporting. What we're going to talk about today is our introduction to exporting, which is part of a 7-stage training program that we have and are developing that'll go live online in the coming days. And that takes exporters through right through to the advanced exporting stage as they grow in their business. Now, before we branch into some of the key things you need to think about on your export journey, and the idea of today is to just give you a feeling for why export and what are the capacity and the capabilities as a business you will require. Often we can run off into exporting and things can go off the rail very quickly. And we need to have a structure in the way we approach this as businesses. And I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly in exporting, and I know what I prefer seeing in my own business and my clients as they go out into the export space. And being involved in the export awards around the country for some time at the Export Council, we see some wonderful success stories. We talk about 7 signposts to begin with that you frame your thinking into exporting as you develop an export strategy and plan and marketing around that. And so we frame that around, first and foremost, understanding your supply channel, knowing who your customer is that you're targeting, and everyone that touches your product or service within the supply chain or sales channel are clients that you need to get familiar with and understand the impact they have on decisions and the requirements they need. We talk about having a separate budget and funding for exporting, and I'll go into that more in a moment. And we talk about having a very clear brand strategy. Often when businesses branch into international markets, they leave the marketing for everyone else to do, even though that in Australia, they do all the marketing, they push, and but all of a sudden forget what it takes to build a brand overseas. And think that their partners on the ground will do all that for them, and that rarely is successful. So you need to have a very clear strategy around how you brand and how you're going to market that in global markets. We talk about looking at one market at a time. So start, apply the training, the things we're talking about today, and other meetings and things that you attend with 2IQ or you read, to be washing all the new information through one market at a time. This helps narrow your focus as you learn all the variables that are required within an international market. We then talk about setting clear corporate objectives. I'll talk about that a little bit more going forward. And we talk about 2 key things, ethics and policy setting. Ethics is an old word, but you'll be faced with many different decisions and new decisions when conducting businesses in international markets under different laws and regulations. And you need to have a very clear policy as a business and as, with your staff who may be going to those markets in the future when we're allowed to travel again, and what they're prepared to do or not do to win the business. I've been in countries where they're notorious for US dollars in brown paper bags, and I remember meeting with a senior government official in one country and just saying, look, this is not how I do business. This is the structure of what we'll do for you, what we'll do for your country, but we will not take bribes or pay bribes. Basically told them that I'd be on the next airplane out if that was the only way they would facilitate business. We found another way to do it that was legal and I'm happy with, and that relationship continued right up to being involved with the president of that country. And the thing that we need to instill in ourselves and in our staff around the ethics of exporting is that regardless of the law in another country, you are always under Australian law. So if it's illegal in this country, but legal in the country that you're exporting to, it's illegal. And you can be tried under Australian law regardless of the law in that other country. And so that's very important to frame with staff. Policy setting flows off the back of that. So having a very clear structure around your policies, around price, payments, and the ethics that we just talked about, and your contracts and what you want and don't want included in a contract. And we talk about having that very clearly understood before you visit a market, rather than during the heat of negotiations where often alcohol can be involved. That's not the time to get excited by a major order being placed in front of you, or a new service contract. You're likely then to be compromised if you haven't set strong boundaries around what you're prepared to do and not do. And I've seen that time and time again. And once certain markets know that they can compromise you or your staff, then they will always compromise you. Frame what you're looking at around those 7 things, and you'll be off to a good start. So why consider exporting? There are many reasons to export. Obviously, for over 20 years, I've made my living out of exporting, both in service industry and in product exporting, and I love it, and it's a wonderful opportunity, and I've seen it change a lot of people's lives, including my own. You're tapping into a global customer base of 7 billion versus 25 million. That's a substantial opportunity. Sometimes you can achieve pricing premiums. And Australia has a wonderful export reputation in the marketplace, and this has only been enhanced by COVID, and we should take advantage of that situation. People are seeing, great respect, with what Australia has achieved, and you're seeing, huge amounts of inquiry around immigration to Australia, let alone trading opportunities outside of Australia. And so we have a range of free trade agreements. It allows you to spread risk in doing export markets. And it's great opportunities to create economies of scale in your operation if you approach it the right way. And obviously having an export international profile enhances the company's profile. So many good reasons to be looking at exporting. Benefits, increasing sales revenue and profit, obviously, lowering risk as you're selling internationally. You can reduce your exposure to one market, and a very good diversified trade strategy in your domestic market, let alone in the international market, is critical to export success. There's a lot of headlines flying around at the moment around the leverage that China's using against us. And whilst, I'm not going to make a political statement about those issues, the leverage that they're using is only the leverage we gave them. And if a business has a strong diversified strategy and they don't put 95% of their sales into one market, then when that market decides to act up or has issues, whether it be environmental, whether it be political risk in those markets, or trade risks as we're seeing, then you're losing a small percentage of your market share rather than the whole cake. And I've been teaching for years that China should be the icing, not the cake, and that's important regardless of whatever market you go into. There's opportunities for more innovation as you compete in international markets, and you need to develop new products and services, and you have an ability to attract good talent, good staff as you grow and get a reputation in international markets. For advantages, there's always disadvantages of exporting, and we at the Export Council, and me personally, I like to see clients go in with their eyes open, that it's not going with a gold rush mentality that I've seen far too many times. You can lose focus on your home markets and existing customers if you get distracted by exporting. Your administrative costs are going to rise as you tackle regulations and trade barriers and issues of learning around moving business outside of Australia. Relationships become more difficult to manage because you've got now remote relationships, to cultivate, and there are time zones and things you need to think about. And you're going to lose potentially some control, especially at the moment when you can't visit markets as freely, over the way that your product is represented or sold in that market, or the way your service is delivered. Therefore, you need to think about how you feel about that and how you're going to handle that. You don't necessarily have all of the understanding and the customer knowledge and the market knowledge, and you need to think very differently in new markets compared to doing business in a state within Australia. And again, time and time again, I see Australian businesses have a mentality that one size fits all. Some of the challenges you'll face: no two markets are the same, and how will you choose the first market for exporting? You're going to have to overcome language and cultural barriers. You're not doing business anymore in Australia, and therefore communication must be clear and culturally sensitive. And Australians generally, or Westerners in general, are not good at this. And so we need to work hard at our approach, whether it be at trade missions, trade shows, visiting markets, how we're going to learn and how we're going to grasp the cultural issues. An example that I give is that I was doing a presentation nearly 20 years ago in Canada to a room full of, senior executives in the hospitality industry, and I lost the room. And I stopped my presentation and said, "Hey, you guys, I've obviously lost you. I've either offended you or confused you, or both." The guy that invited me to speak made a comment about something I said that was a bit of an offensive term in Canada. I told him what it meant in Australia. We all had a laugh. And then after that presentation, I went, wow, if I can lose a room English to English, imagine what damage I could do in Asia or in the Middle East. And so I made learning about culture and doing business in those countries paramount to any visit that I have, and I still do that to this day. You need to form clear policies around risk and risk management. There are a lot more things out of your control, as I said, in international markets, and risk is part of exporting. It's part of any business strategy, but in international markets, you can't avoid risk. Therefore, you've got to have clear strategy around that, and you've got to be comfortable with some level of risk. Contracts are very different in international markets, and you need a fresh approach to that. Financing is very different, and you're starting to deal with things that you've never really dealt with before around payment terms and credit risk when goods are off-site and shipped in a container potentially for 5 weeks floating on an ocean. You're going to have staff in international markets, delivering maybe engineering agreements and service delivery, or you may be doing some component manufacturing or putting things together within market, to be able to deliver your service or product. So all of this has financial risk, people risk. Currencies exchange. In one role that I had, we were hedging in 26 different currencies around the world as we were exporting, and that was a daily review. So that we could keep on top of any movements, certainly in some of the more volatile currencies like the South African rand. And then you have a whole new range of insurances that you need to think of that you don't have in your existing business. Other things you'll need to think about is documentation and export protocols, depending on what industry you're in. Some of the service industries, it goes right up to the Department of Defence for review. There's a whole range of products that they consider sensitive to exporting and services, so that they will be a point of review in your process before you'll be cleared to export. Incoterms around shipping, again, insurance is directly related to shipping, and then all the different fees and charges that are involved. All of it can be learnt, all of it can be looked out for, and very quickly your freight forwarders become your best friend. Certainly good freight forwarders, and it's key to research and get the right one. There's a lot of inconsistencies around markets. You can have visa issues, licensing issues, and you can have violation around intellectual property. And those things need to be dealt with well. One of my favourite problems around getting IP wrong is the company that we've all would have heard of called Viagra. They were doing incredibly well in China, but the word Viagra really didn't mean anything in China. So they came up with a term, a Chinese name for their company, which meant strongman. That's how it translated. And so on their packaging, they had this Chinese word for strongman. Their sales were going gangbusters, but they didn't register the name strongman. And in China, whoever registers the IP first owns the IP. So some very clever person went and registered the term strongman. He then had Viagra had to remove their product from sale. He quickly came up with a generic product like Viagra and captured 70% of the market share very quickly. And then Viagra had to fight their way back into the market. So big lesson learned there for that international company. Is going global right for your business? So there are a few things that you need to really clear before you branch off into international exporting. You've got to ensure that there's a strong management commitment, whether you're a mum and dad business, a partnership with a friend or a business associate, or you're a larger company now branching into international markets. There must be buy-in across the business. I recently met a husband and wife business who shared their story with me. They moved to Melbourne, back to the family farm, developed a range of products. They sat down together at the dining table, to talk about their commitment and the way forward. And the husband was nervous and he just said, look, I'm not 100% committed yet to this plan of yours. And so the wife said, you're out. And he said, what do you mean? And he said, go get a job, you're out. If you're not 100% committed, it's not going to work, you're out. So she fired her husband. The business is growing and doing really well. And I can imagine how often she reminds me of that poor choice of hers around the dinner table. I said to her, when are you going to let him back in the business? And she said, not yet. So you really need a dedicated commitment, and everyone needs to be on that journey. You need to have financial resources in place. You cannot rob your existing business and risk what you have to fund the international markets. You never want to risk what got you to where you're at. And time again, clients go into the exporting, they don't have a marketing budget, they don't have a financial budget for exporting, things get tight, takes longer than they expected, and then they start pilfering funds to fund it from the existing business and risk everything. That's not a good strategy. You need to develop some expertise. Somebody needs to be the point person within the organisation that will champion exporting and teach everyone else. And you need to have long horizons. Successful exporting businesses generally take years to develop, much like your existing business did. And so you need to have a long-term strategy to the approach and your commitment, your funding, your marketing, etc., to build successful markets overseas. So is going global right for your business? Does exporting fit with your growth strategy at this point of time? Will selling your products or services in international markets be a great utilisation of your existing resources and allow some capacity to grow? Have you reached your capacity in Australia? Is there further growth you can achieve here to further strengthen your business before your export? Is your product or service legally recognised to export, and do you have the qualifications in Australia needed to target an export market? And what product is your product or service more suited to a certain type of market, and are there restrictions in that market? So whilst we have some wonderful free trade agreements, there's a lot of restrictions in certain markets and very protective of those markets, and so you need to do that homework before you waste too much time, branching into that market. do you have the resources or that person to commit to doing the research? And are you structured to be able to handle new markets? And can your business support overseas clients and service them well? And can, once we're allowed to travel again, can someone commit to visiting the market on a regular basis? Generally, if you're new to exporting and you're trying to establish in new markets, then key people need to be there at least twice a year. And if you're in service delivery, you're going to be there a lot more often as you implement what you're delivering. So before we branch into the structure of your capacity, we always come back and start with looking and reviewing your domestic market. You just need to ensure that your current operation is strong. How will exporting affect that domestic focus of your business? And how will you ensure your domestic business does not suffer? How will you handle pricing communications between your exporting markets and your domestic markets, whether one's cheaper than the other, which is often the case? And for some reason, they always seem to find out. How will you communicate your strategy to your suppliers and customers at home? And how may those customers respond when they're hearing that you're off exporting? Will they see that as a loss of focus or concern that you're not going to service them as well, which often happens? How will you handle inventory management or resource deployment? So you're doing an engineering contract, you've got 2 or 3 engineers in your organisation. All of a sudden that expands dramatically overseas and you now need to find another 3 engineers. Or you need to send 2 of your engineers overseas. How's that going to impact your existing structure? You're a manufacturer. You're at 80-90% capacity domestically. You win an export market. It quickly grows to a lot bigger than you expect. Who gets priority over the stock? And how do you communicate that? How are your competitors in the domestic market going to respond to your exporting? We often forget about our domestic competitors in this space, but it's critical, that you review that. Will they pursue your domestic customers claiming you've lost focus because you're exporting? Will they wait till you've done all the investment, all the hard work, and then approach your international customers and offer something much cheaper? You really, I've seen both those things, happen all the time. So, it's important that you have a clear understanding of how your competitors and your domestic customers are going to respond to you exporting. We move on looking at, your capabilities and capacity. Let's just take a moment to reflect. As I said earlier on, exporting is very, very exciting, but it can't distract from your existing business, as I've said. Success is not guaranteed, and a lot of businesses fail for many reasons at their first attempt, but most of it is due to a lack of resources, lack of funding, marketing, and a lack of research into the market they're going into, and they often choose the wrong market. Australian businesses are notorious for having a build it, they will come mentality, and that just doesn't happen. We just recently launched a new business, and I said to my staff, it's wonderful, pat everyone on the back for a moment, just take a second to reflect on, the effort that's gone into the launch. And then I had ... in the email, and I went, great, there's your moment over. Now let's talk about building a successful business, because customers don't come, you get them. And so, we've got to take a different approach and really work hard at the same way you did in your existing business. And is your product or service known in that international market? Very difficult for Australian sparkling wine producers to sell wine to France, the home of champagne. I would not waste my time. Similar, it's difficult to sell ICT services in companies in the Silicon Valley. Not impossible, but difficult. So we need to think about, again, the market aligns with the opportunity. So where do you start? You start with a clean whiteboard and you develop a clear export plan. If you don't have a business plan, then I would recommend you go back and start with a business plan in your existing business. 70% of Australian businesses don't have one in the SME, MME space. But exporting is a whole new ballgame, and you've got to look at it like a new business. And an export plan and a marketing strategy or an existing plan, it doesn't need to be anything that a university professor wrote. It needs to be in your language, in your speak, and what works for your business. We start with a simple SWOT analysis. It's an oldie but a goodie. Just start with that, work through that, and then use that as the basis to develop out your business strategy for exporting, looking at your strengths and your weaknesses and your opportunities, etc. And then develop some simple financial modeling. You need to be hungry again. You need to remember what it was like when you started the business that you're in, and allow that hunger to drive the new opportunity. And you need to have a clear strategy, and complement that passion and drive that you have. And then you need support. There are no lone rangers in exporters. There are none. Those that attempt to do this on their own lose money and lose considerable money. So you have wonderful support being Australian businesses. We have an incredible array of state-based organisations supporting us, like TAQ, and you have their international offices, and then you have Austrade all over the world. You have industry bodies that are placed overseas and here, like the Export Council and others. And other countries that I interact with would kill to have the level of support that we have, not to mention the government grants around EMDG and other things that are supported at this stage to help us getting exporting. So in the capacity side, you'll need new knowledge, you'll need new resources, and you'll need new skills, to drive the business. You'll need to attract good people. You need time to make important decisions, and you need the people around you to help you to make those. You need clear leadership structure. You need clear accounting and management performance in place to measure your effectiveness of what you're doing. And you need to be, really efficient in the operational side of managing the costs. And you need to learn the costs that you're not aware of, and how you develop those costing sheets and mechanisms to monitor that. And you need to work out how you're going to have the customer connectivity to establish long-term relationships. And that is key. And we've seen that in so many businesses across COVID, where they've had extensive long-term commitments and relationships. They are the ones that have hung on and done well through this period or survived. We've had one bad debt internationally, and it's very small, and that's from someone that we've done business with for 10 years. And they've had a really difficult time with COVID, with a lot of their clients going under. And we just moved that from the P&L to the balance sheet, and said to them, pay us off as a loan whenever you can. In Hong Kong, we were owed some money early on when things were going pear-shaped in Hong Kong. And my distributor said to me, look, I'm good for the money, we'll get through it. And I said to him, yes, I know you're good for the money, because I know where you live, I know your mother, I know your father, I know your brother, I know where your wife works, I know what school your kids go to, I know where your daughter does tennis lessons, I know what country club you're members of, so you can't hide. And he laughed and he joked, and I said, and he knew what I meant by that we had a trusted relationship. He'd let me into his family, and that I knew he was good for the funds, and he paid every cent. And that person, we've now established a new company together in Hong Kong, and he owns 50% of it. I own 50% of it, and we'll be launching in the coming weeks. That business. And that's the strength of that relationship. But it took a long-term time to connect that relationship and develop it to that level of trust. But critical in international markets. You need to know the people you're doing business with. Culture is one of the biggest things we need to overcome. I have seen senior Australian executives offend people around the world time and time again. And we are so used to doing business our own way. We haven't exported before. So if you're a Queensland business and you've got a wonderful product or service and you're looking to expand in the state, subconsciously you don't think about a lot of things. You don't have to change your presentations. You don't have to change your pricing structures, your contracts. When you go and do a presentation or visit a trade show in the interstate, you don't have to speak any different. You don't have to dress any different. There's no sensitivity when you go out for dinner and have a beer together. You know subconsciously just how to act. Then you take that subconscious attitude into a trade fair in the international market, and sometimes you'll embarrass yourself or you'll offend people. We need to be reminded of those unconscious bias and relearn the way that we do business into every market we go into, because it can be very, very different from one market to another. And this is where it's important as you move forward to align in your capabilities, your objectives. You need to have a well-defined, realistic goal set by the company that'll influence your internal and external strategies towards exporting. As we look at company capacity, we think of capacity in an export sense as a business. It can be described as your ability to absorb the demand and the change on the conditions of what the business you're doing. Similar to a sponge can only absorb so much liquid, and once at capacity, it's unable to absorb any more. Your business has finite resources. You only have a limited amount of time and energy if you're an SME, even an MME. Therefore, you may have the internal skills and the capacity to export, but at some stage that capacity is going to reach its potential. And what gives? I had an exporter that did a trade show he shouldn't have done. He's a manufacturer in Tasmania. He went and did the trade show instead of sending his sales staff. Got some wonderful leads. I reminded him of the importance of follow-up. He came back to his factory within 2 days. Some major machinery had broken down his factory, and for the next 3 weeks he buried himself in the factory to get things back on track. A month later I touched base with him again, because when that happened I told him, I'll give all the leads across to your salesperson, or I'll handle them, send them to me. He said he'd do it. A month later he hadn't done it. That trade show and the $10,000 that he'd spent was a waste of time. So capacity and measuring that is really, really important. As we said, measuring your financial position, the value or the quantity of your production opportunity, costs of output, and the people that are involved in doing that. And we can very quickly, in the excitement of exporting or to get the sale, we can overestimate our capacity. And I had another client that was expecting 1 ton orders from Japan, and then that went well for a couple of months, and then they ordered 40 ton. That didn't go well. And they had done no homework on the capacity of what that client was looking for. They hadn't asked the question. They were excited to get a 1 ton order. That was an unbelievable fill, to their factory and everything they were doing. 40 ton, that was unbelievably out of their scale and thinking in the short term. We managed to get through it and hold the contract, extend the 40 ton out over a period of time, and that contract has continued now for the last few years. So in measuring that capacity, again, we start with a management commitment. Who's going to drive it, who's going to be the one responsible for teaching the team, and bringing in all the stakeholders across the business. How are you going to manage the human resources across the business, to maximize the opportunity that presents itself, but doesn't, minimize your domestic opportunities and create issues. How are you going to train, develop, and regulate your staff going into international markets? I have seen more men than women get themselves into a lot of trouble in international markets when alcohol is applied, because some markets, they try to compromise you. And as I said earlier, once they do that, they have you. And so you need to be really clear around, the rules and regulations for your staff going into those markets. Again, financial resources, establish the budget separate, and understand the cost basis. Communication strategies around time zones. Thank God for do not disturb. Some cultures like North Americans never think about what time it is in Australia, even Europeans. And my phone would ring every night, or nearly every night, but certainly text messages going off every night if I didn't have do not disturb on. But they may require a level of servicing overnight if you're delivering, in the engineering space, mining space. You're delivering in service requirements, and you need to think through how you're going to manage that, and then how you're going to communicate all of that again back to domestic clients, and how you're going to problem solve the communication issues that come up, and how you're going to feed all that back to all the stakeholders. And you've got to work through again where you're going to get all the technical learning and requirements and the protocols and the supply chain and sales and demands and the learning through all of that. And who are you going to be key people that you develop relationships that are trusted sources of this information, especially when you can't visit the market anymore. And there needs to be greater transparency in relationships than ever before in a COVID world, because you just can't be there. And then planning around time frame, like the example I've just gave. You've got to be upfront about your capacity and your capability with your potential customers, and align the right market. So if you can handle a 10 to 15% jump in capacity in your manufacturing or your service delivery, then a big market in Asia or may not be a great place to start. Maybe you might try a smaller market, like Singapore or Hong Kong or Taiwan, or New Zealand. If you're looking at North America and you have interest from there, you've got to look at North America as 50 different countries. We joke it's the ununited States of America when it comes to exporting. And you've got to remember that California is nearly twice the size of Australia in population. So maybe you don't start at California. You pick a state that you think there's an opportunity there. Regulations are different from every state. So you've got to work out, and some states may not align well for your product or service. Scale, as we talked about, Australia represents 0.33% of the world's population. So you've got to align all of these things up to ensure that the scalability of your business meets the client's expectations. Certainly in Asia, if you let clients down considerably and they lose face, you lose the business and you never get it back. So you want to under-promise and over-deliver in exporting every single time. And you've got to think about how you're going to staff this and how you're going to manage it offshore if things really grow. And again, competition, you're entering in a whole new world of competition. And not everybody in international markets, including governments, play by the rules. So again, measuring your risk appetite, you may want to start in a market that you feel much more comfortable with, that their strategy and their rules and regulations align more with Australia. As I said to someone recently, I would, maybe not start exporting to North Africa. Why don't you just try somewhere a little bit more friendly and more accessible and more under the rule of law? You think you've had competition issues or struggles with your domestic competitors, wait till you're dealing with global competitors. And so you need to anticipate that. You need to know who your global competitors are going to be, and you need to know who you're unseating. So if you're in a manufactured good, or a food and beverage product, or even in a service delivery where someone else is losing a contract for you to take that up, how are they going to respond to that? What's their history? How do they normally respond to them losing business? That's good information to learn and grasp before you take on somebody that you're not going to be able to handle. You know, and we joke that in North America, if you get this strategy wrong, someone will steal your patent or your IP or your brand, and basically say, see you in court, and whoever has the deepest pockets wins. In China, if you manufacture a widget, they'll learn everything about that widget, and then all of a sudden they'll be making it for half the price that you are making it at, and selling it and making twice the money that you'd be making if you don't get it right there. And in the Middle East and North Africa, if you get your strategy wrong, you lose your life. You know, and that's reality. So, you know, you need to align your risk, your competition strategy, and your ability and your capacity to a market that you feel comfortable with. I don't want to sound negative or frightening. I've made a living out of exporting for over 20 years. But I have one shot when you're starting on that journey to instill in you the importance of good strategy. Because if you get it right from day one, you're going to have a wonderful journey, and it will change your lives and the lives of those that work within you. You know, and if you're in a smaller community, a regional community, it can have a wonderful effect on a regional community when businesses start exporting well. Because you know, the jobs stay local, the money stays local, you know, and it's a great thing to see how you can change a community through exporting. So as we wrap up, you know, exporting requires new capabilities to be developed. These capabilities should be supported by clear strategies and work towards clear corporate objectives. Your company's capacity to export will determine how your capabilities can be utilised. They go together. And your commitment to exporting is vital. And you'll need everyone involved in the business to be committed to the journey. And remember, overestimating capacity will compromise your ability to successfully manage the growth in your organisation, and it will risk and create problems for your domestic business. You'll need to review your capabilities and capacities in an objective and realistic manner. One of the mistakes that we make is we believe our own BS. We think our product or our service is just amazing. It's been well received domestically, but we need to go out into a market with a fresh set of eyes. We had one industry that was failing 10 years ago. It was a wonderful new product. And they'd made assumptions that the world knew they were growing this product, that the world would want the product in a counter-seasonal market, and you know, it would be highly successful. They'd done no research on price, marketing, and understanding the market. When I asked a couple of key people in one of the biggest growers, he reckoned that 90% of the world knew that they were growing their product. I undertook an international market survey of core buyers of that product in the counter-seasonal cycle, and we found that 2% of the markets around the world knew that we were growing that product. You know, we developed an international market strategy, and within 3 years, we were selling in over 30 countries around the world and winning major export awards. So, you know, you need to have a clear understanding of the market and the opportunity that's there, and not assume that that they're aware of who you are and what you're doing. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We're right on the hour space, but I've got time to hang around if someone wants to either type in a message or come off mute and ask me a question. I'm more than happy to try and answer
it. Brett here. It was very informative. I found it very, very good, mate. Thank you very much. I took a lot of notes, but it's obviously, there's quite a lot to it when you go through the points and the considerations that need to be made. A lot of homework to do, especially with the costings as well. When you start talking insurances and covering your own ass in that respect, and getting with a good freight forwarder, all very important things. I think our business at the moment is we're sort of at capacity. We don't really have, you know, the ability to make more product at the moment. We're constrained by our current size of our business and also the resources. So I've taken all the notes, and I'll take that back to my the directors and say, you want to get into exporting, well, these are the considerations.
And you'll receive a copy of my presentation. Obviously, I've skimmed over a number of slides, so there's a lot more detail in there that you'll receive this afternoon that will really, help you answer the questions. And we're developing an export checklist that'll be ready soon through our website that people can do it, and then it'll spit out whether they're exporting or not. So.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, whether we're aligned. Yeah, that's a good idea. That'll be good to gain a copy of. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Brett.
Hazel. Yeah, so Hazel just asked for our contact here. So yeah, at the end, so later this afternoon, we'll send out some presentations with our contact details and with a thank you to everyone as well. So that'll be sent out. Any other questions from anyone before we finish up?
All good. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks everyone, and we'll be in touch shortly with that presentation. And thanks again, Shane, for your time. And it was great to hear those stories again. I always pick up something new from your presentation, so it's fantastic.
No problems at all, Jeffrey. Happy to help.
Okay. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.